Hello, Douglas Roberts here, Education Development Officer for the Scottish Council on Archives. This is 10-20-30, our winter series of learning workshops for archivists and heritage organisations. Today we're looking at building and maintaining online audiences. We have various words to describe the people who use our archive services. We talk about users of the archives, researchers, readers, customers, visitors. These words suggest engagement and a proactive approach, people who come into us because we have records, information and expertise that they want. By contrast, we tend to think of an audience as a group of people who come together to be entertained in a more passive way, perhaps attracted by the prospect of an enjoyable distraction or an interesting presentation for an hour or two. I think it's more helpful to think of an online audience for archive services as a mix of all these people. You have those with a specific query or research brief, and you have the people who like seeing the historic photos you put up on Facebook. And then there's the people who stumbled on your content by accident but stayed because you wrote something funny about a 19th century newspaper report, or because their great-aunt Doris used to live in a village near your archive office. So audience isn't the most useful word to describe that mix of people unless we broaden its meaning to include them all. And when we go online, we can expect to find this much more diverse audience with many more reasons to engage with us. So, is it worth the effort? It takes time and ongoing work to build and maintain an online audience. So, why bother? In a word, visibility. So why be visible online? Well, archive services are having to justify their existences just now to ensure ongoing funding and staffing. They've been doing that for some time actually, but the pandemic restrictions mean our reading and search rooms are closed or subject to strict limits. People are relying more and more on online services to access information, communicate and interact. So it's important that we make ourselves visible and available online to the people we're here to serve. It's also an opportunity to deconstruct the mystique that still accompanies the public image of archive services. Online, we can engage with the public through media and in forums that have become very familiar to people. Social media, video, podcasts, websites, blog posts. We can make records available, sometimes in ways that aren't possible in a search room, and challenge the idea that archives are inaccessible or a bit scary to visit. Online engagement isn't geographical, so your online audience can be widespread and diverse, and your online content is immediately accessible to people through any computer, tablet or phone anywhere in the world. Why bother? Well, COVID-19 restrictions are fueling a revolution in the use of online services and tools. Working practices are changing for the long term, with a massive increase in everyday internet use. Even when the restrictions eventually lift, this increased everyday use of online services is going to continue, and we need to be part of that change and well versed in how to use the tools and services of the internet. What does your current online presence consist of, and what does it look like? Many archive services in Scotland have a Twitter presence and a Facebook page. Maybe you have a LinkedIn profile or an Instagram page. Whatever different social media platforms you're using, they combine to create a public face for your service on social media. Now, by its nature, this social media presence is dynamic. It's constantly changing and happening in a chronological timeline. Posts from a month ago disappear in the wake of new posts, while others stay current for a while as people respond, discuss and argue. Spending time on Facebook or Twitter is a bit like walking around a crowded hall, catching snatches of conversation, but mostly hanging around with the people we know already. What do we put up on social media and why? I've noticed a lot of archive services post regular images of digitized records on social media with brief explanations and sometimes a click-through link to further information. These posts can get good engagement because they're visual, immediate, and often recognizable. We'll talk more about the value and impact of this in our live webinar on building online audiences, and also how to move beyond a simple visual pick and mix approach. You can prepare for the webinar by thinking about what your current social media presence consists of and noting down which types of posts receive the most views and useful feedback from viewers. Also, think about why you put up the posts you do, what you're hoping to achieve with them, and how they benefit your service. In addition to social media, your archive service may have a dedicated website or pages as part of a larger organizational site. Unlike social media, this web content doesn't change unless you add or delete material. For users, visiting this website is a positive choice rather than the more passive serving up of dynamic content via social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. There has to be a reason for people to visit your website, and more particularly, to revisit. Putting all this together, what does your overall online presence look like? What message does it send out about the archive, its contents and services, and the people who work there? In preparing for the webinar, make a list of all the ways that your service appears online and what impression of your service you think this provides for people who see it. Who are you trying to reach with your online activities? Think about who these people are and what their interest is in your archive service. Are you reaching the people you want to reach? Are you reaching other archivists, for example? If so, are they in Scotland or further afield? Are you reaching local people who also use your search room? Are you engaging young people, school children, teachers, local historians? What about people who have never set foot in the archive before? Do you have online visitors from overseas? Where can you find the people that you're wanting to find and point them to your online content? Make some notes about the people you're reaching online and the people you'd like to reach. Social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook can be useful in reaching people who have an interest in archives, and in your service in particular, because people on those platforms select the sources of information they want by following groups and individuals with similar interests. So make sure that you're following those same organizations and individuals with an interest in archives, history, and record keeping. Interact with those groups by liking posts, commenting on interesting posts, retweeting, or contributing to discussion. When people see your engagement with others, they're more likely to have a look at what you're putting online. With social media, it's essential to post regularly and often, but not too often and not just for the sake of it. Online audiences like regular, interesting content, but they get bored with repetition, and they get annoyed if they feel bombarded with material. We'll have a look into this in more detail in our webinar as well. Your social media activity is a good way to point people to your richer online content, such as your website or web pages, regular blog posts, email newsletter, an online exhibition, podcast, YouTube video, webinar, whatever else you're putting online already. You may already have an audience for this online activity. So who's in this audience and what are they interested in seeing from you? It's better to have 100 people who are really interested in what you have to offer than 1,000 people who casually click through and find little of interest. For this reason, knowing and maintaining your audience is as important as attracting new people. So how do you do this? When we interact with people in a search room, over time we get to know the people who use our services and we adapt to what they want and how they work. Online, this can be more tricky because people are less visible and sometimes less willing to reveal information about themselves. Online, we need to rely more on clarity of language, good questioning, building trust, clarification using surveys and user data. We can also use analytics from website data to learn more about who's visiting our website, reading our blogs, or listening to our podcasts. We'll have a look at analytics in more detail in the webinar. Number one here is creating good quality content. So what's content? Basically, it's anything you create and put online, like Facebook posts, pictures on Instagram, blog posts, YouTube videos, academic articles, opinion pieces, exhibitions, podcasts, as well as even jokes and funny stories. It's useful to differentiate this from reposting other people's material or posting responses to other people's content. This is still part of your online presence and it forms part of the impression that you create online, but your content is what you generate yourself. Your content is your original creative contribution, and your audience views this content and then decides whether to come back for more or not. When you create this content, make sure it's good quality, which means it's of value to your audience. Good content is original in some way, so it contains information not available elsewhere. What have you got to offer that is particular to your service, your area, your collections? Secondly, good content is of value to your audience. It's something your online audience wants to see, or it meets a need for information, entertainment, emotional or intellectual connection, It also demonstrates that you know your audience and are speaking to them directly. Thirdly, good content is attractive and easy to access. I don't mean using simplified language necessarily, but use accessible fonts and comfortable spacing, consistent language, interesting layout of text and images. If you're filming or recording, use decent equipment. A little bit of design, even in a simple blog post, can make the difference between somebody reading your material or clicking through to something else. Don't be afraid to copy good ideas. Make a list of pages and sites that you tend to visit because you like what they produce. Think of how you could create similar content for your online offering. You can't please everybody, of course, and online you never will. So your content is primarily an expression of your professional work and the service you offer to your users. Stay true to that, and you can't go far wrong. I talk a lot about telling stories, but I think this is key to communicating with people. When we create a piece of online content, it's part of a longer narrative built on what we've put out there already and possibly leading towards planned material in the future. People tend to connect new information and experiences to something in their existing knowledge. So think of your online content as an ongoing narrative, a dialogue with your audience, rather than a broadcast from you to them. Even something simple like publicizing an upcoming event or an online exhibition or your latest podcast or video can be a story with a beginning that engages interest, a middle that builds anticipation, and an ending that delivers the final product. Ask yourself what story you're telling about your archive service through the different pieces of online content and online engagement you create. Why are you telling that story, and who's it for? In our webinar, we'll look in more detail at these different aspects of building and maintaining an online audience. We'll look at the different available online platforms, the practicalities of creating and uploading content, planning social media campaigns and interaction, making a content schedule, learning about your online users and engaging meaningfully with them. Thanks for watching. See you next time.